So this is part 2 of Graham's flying adventures in the US, because I couldn't think of any better thing to call it. So I hope you enjoyed me chatting about the first part of my flying experiences, primarily in the US, although I did have a lot of fun in the UK as well. I met some really interesting and crazy people. So I'd sort of shared flying to a remote airfield and nearly having a head-on with somebody else if I hadn't just been lucky and caught the glint of the sun shining off this guy's, I guess, part of the glass on the aircraft or something. Anyway, something reflected enough to make me just hang back and just see what was going on. And probably the most embarrassing cross-country I had was going across, I can't remember the name of the airport now. There were a couple of instances at airports, because where we were flying out of, Newport News Airport, I don't know what the official name is, but they were flying commercial jets in, so the smaller airliners. But this other one was also a big airport from my perspective, and it had commercial flights going in. And what you get in the UK, it's called Poolies, or used to be called Poolies, and it's a little book, and it has diagrams of every airport and airfield in the UK. So you know how many runways you've got, which direction they're going, because that's important. And you've probably seen the 2 digits on the runway. They're the angular direction of the runways. So a runway that's at sort of 280 degrees, if you go from 0 right the way around to 280 degrees, that would be runway 28. So that's what that comes from. So that's what those numbers, if you ever wondered what those numbers were on a runway. And as a pilot, it's good to know what you're facing, because if you've got different runways, certainly they'll tend to be using one runway or another so that you're taking off and landing into the wind. So I mentioned that last time, that helps to shorten both your takeoff run and your landing run. So and in the US, I can't now quite remember how we did it, but I didn't have a Poolies book, but I did have a chart of this particular airfield, and it had 3 runways. So that meant that I would need to not only get clearance to land and get in the pattern or do whatever, but know which runway I was aiming for. So I did my long cross country, and that was all good. And then when you're 10 miles out, roughly 10 miles from your destination, you've radio. You have the frequency for the air traffic control for that airport, and you identify yourself, and they can then see you and know who you are, and they'll tell you what to do. So quite often what they'll do, they'll put you into what they call the pattern. And that's where everybody flies in either a clockwise or anti-clockwise direction. And then once you're in that pattern, you're well spaced out, and then you basically come down and land in turn, so that there's enough space for people to land, clear the runway, and then the next person behind comes in. So the runways I was using were not particularly busy, and it was normal to just be told to do to come straight in, basically, and you do a long final where you don't bother with the pattern. You'll just point yourself at the runway and off you go. So as I say, I was expecting to see 3 runways, and they'd given me the number. So I was looking at my compass heading, trying to just get myself aligned so that I was on the right heading. So I just basically go straight onto this runway. And as I got in closer, there was an extra runway, so there was a runway there I hadn't expected. It was very close in terms of its angle to the one I'd been told to land on. And possibly through an experience, I can't remember now, it was a long time ago, but I was trying to work out which was which, and I couldn't quite figure it out. So I basically took a punt on one. And as I was coming in, I could see these big X's across it. So a big X on the runway means you don't use it. You don't land on that runway. It's not in use. So by then I was so close that I couldn't switch to the other runway. So I had to radio and say, I'm on the wrong alignment. I'm going to have to abandon the runway. And they said, okay, get into the pattern. So I then got myself basically got high, flew across so that I could get into this pattern, and then kind of did a loop round and landed. So that was embarrassing enough. And then once I'd landed, they told me to get off at a particular taxiway, given that there were other aircraft coming in behind me, and I couldn't quite see which taxiway they meant. So I thought, well, I'll take this first one because I wouldn't want to go past it. And of course, as soon as I turned off, I realized I'd got the wrong one. And so I then had to radio in and say, okay, I'm now in the wrong place. So that meant I had to go back out onto the runway because they didn't have these big taxiways that you see in these big international airports that I imagine most of you are familiar with. This was a small regional airport. It had the runway, and that was primarily what you did. You went up and down on the runway. So I had to then wait for a gap and then get clearance to buzz along the runway and then go off where I was supposed to go. And when I got down there was actually somebody standing this taxiway to make sure I didn't mess it up again. So yeah, that was kind of embarrassing. Another remote one was it was another small field. It was all good, and what we would do in the small fields, we taxi in the aircraft, but with a small apron, you haven't got, or a small area, you haven't always got the room to completely turn the aeroplane around while you're. I mean, you could sort of hold one foot hard down on the brake and just throttle it to get it to really turn on the other, to sort of pivot on the other one. But we kind of would do that a little bit, but you still had to back it up. So we'd just get out and push the aircraft back into the right spot. And I remember at this particular airfield, this dog came running over, and it had 3 legs. So one of the front legs was missing, and it would keep jumping up at me. And I just knocked the leg down because I really didn't want it jumping up while I was trying to push my aeroplane. But anyway, so strange things you get when you're flying. So I spoke before about taking photographs, and one of the places that I did take a lot of photographs was, and it wasn't in a Cessna, it was in a Piper Arrow, which so that's a slightly bigger aircraft. The Cessna 150s, 152s are basically 2-seaters. You sit side by side in the front. The 172 is bigger. That has I think it's 4 seats, so there's a row of seats behind, and then they do variations of it, and sometimes 172s or Skyvans. There's sort of variations of that design. The design are used for parachute jumps and that kind of stuff, so they're getting a little bit bigger. So I was tending to fly the small ones. And what we decided to do one day, I was staying with 2 English guys. We were sharing this apartment in near the airport. We just get one of them would have a car, or we'd sort of bum a lift from somebody to get there in the morning or get back in the evening, whatever we were doing, because you don't walk in the US, obviously. And because we couldn't do any solo flying, and we were all learning, we're all trainees, we couldn't really do much flying. One of them had the idea of us all chipping in together and hiring this Piper Arrow, which is a bigger aircraft. It's a very comfortable 4-seater, low wing, retractable undercarriage, variable pitch propeller, which was fun. So definitely a level of sophistication, more than we were used to flying with the little Cessnas. And it had an autopilot on it as well. So that was really cool, actually. I was flying for the first leg, and we flew down to a place called Kitty Hawk, which is where the Wright brothers flew, and is apparently the first manned flight of a powered aircraft. I have seen, not to offend any American people, but I've certainly seen some stuff that put some question marks over whether or not the Wright brothers actually flew the distance they claimed on the first attempt, on the attempt where there was nobody there. And that was the one where they said they did it because they were unable to replicate it for some time. And even pictures taken at the time, sort of people have looked at them and said, yeah, the aircraft looks to be in the wrong spot if they actually did what they said they did. So I've got my doubts about the Wright brothers, and certainly given the way they carried on afterwards by trying to patent everything to do with aircraft design, even if it wasn't their own, because the way they steered their aircraft was a thing called wing warping. So it actually physically twisted the wing. They didn't use ailerons. Ailerons were invented, I think, by Curtis, the guy who, another American, another pioneer. But that's a small section in the wing that goes up and down, and you have them one on each side of the wing usually, and they move in opposite directions, and that then turns the aircraft. But the Orville, the Wright brothers design didn't do that at all. It was completely different. The only reason that they were stopped from patenting everything was when the First World War came along. The American government decided there were going to be no patents on aircraft design because they wanted to get aircraft that could be used in the war, and they wanted them fast. So and Curtis had actually offered to work with the Wright brothers, and they'd I can't remember which one of it was, but he seems to have been quite a opportunistic and, in my opinion, a nasty piece of work. So there you go. Anyway, that's enough about the Wright brothers. But we did fly down there, and it was quite fun to fly into the place where supposedly the first this first manned flight over whatever the distance was supposed to be took place. And flying the Piper was really cool as well, because as soon as it was up, I wanted the undercarriage up. I'm one of those pilots, I guess. I don't like the wheels sticking out. I like it to be a flying machine, not a something that you wheel. So we'd get the my idea was to get the wheels up as fast as possible, and then set up the autopilot, and then we kind of flew down there. But I didn't notice that the autopilot wasn't working, because I had also my visual landmarks in mind, and as we were flying down, I could see we were drifting off. So I kind of readjusted the autopilot, but I think there was something wrong with it anyway. In the end, I abandoned it, and we flew down, and then the other guys flew back. So that was really fun, though. That was fun being in a nice aircraft. Very comfortable aircraft, not the sort of really small, noisy ones. This was really nice. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a drink. Okay, sorry about that. So that was going down to Kitty Hawk. But what we did we went off to this place where I had oysters for the first time. Kill Devil's Hill, I think it was, from memory. So if you know that area, these might mean something to you. So that was my experience of flying the Piper Arrow. Now, another experience that I had with flying at the busy airports was actually coming back to my home airport at Newport News. Now, one of the things that got absolutely hammered into us was that for absolutely no reason did you force one of the commercial airliners to do a go-around. Now, a go-around is where you abandon a landing and you basically put the throttle back in, you go faster, you climb, then you turn round and you basically go all the way back round again and have another go at the landing. So that was absolutely gospel for us. There was absolutely no occasion where we were allowed to force a commercial airliner to do a go round. So anyway, on this particular occasion, I've been doing a cross-country flight. I was radioing in at the 10-mile mark to let the guys know I was coming in, and I could hear other traffic about on the radio, because you're listening all the time, because you can hear other people calling on the same frequency, so you know who they are, where they're going, what kind of aircraft they are. And I knew I had I think it's a DC-10 McDonnell Douglas, so it's sort of it's sort of a medium-sized airliner, and I knew they were some distance behind me, but I was expecting to be told to go into the pattern, because I'm in my tiny little Cessna, and these guys are going much faster than me, big jet airliner. So I was quite surprised when I was told to come straight in, because I was basically put on a long final. So I'd had my approach all sorted out, because I'd flown, by then landed quite a few times at that particular airport, so I knew what I was doing. But all the time, I can hear this other one getting closer and closer, just listening to the radio calls. And then as I was just about to come in and getting close to the threshold to actually come down and land, I could hear the controller saying to this McDonnell Douglas that you may have to do a go-around. And I thought, oh, no, there's absolutely not. So I just got the thing down as soon as I could. I was still going quite fast for what I was supposed to be doing. And I just went hammering up the runway on the ground and got to the taxiway and pretty much had one foot on the brake, because you turn an aircraft on the ground by using the brakes. You've got individual brakes on the left and right wheel in this sort of tricycle undercarriage that or the small wheel at the front, the nose wheel, and then the two main wheels under the wings. That arrangement, that triangular arrangement, you land on your back wheels, so you land with your nose up on the back wheels and then drop the nose wheel down. When you're sort of slow enough, you just pop it down. So the way you steer is that there are individual brakes on these two rear wheels that you can work independently. So to turn left, you just apply the brake on the left wheel and you go to the left. So anyway, I'm belting down the runway, going quite fast, and my taxiway's coming up. I know this jet is just coming in behind me, I mean, he's pretty much over the threshold at that point. So I pretty much stood on the brake and pretty much went round on two wheels, and then got to my checkpoint. So when you come off the runway, there's actually a line where you have to stop. And what you normally do, just some basic checks on the aircraft, and you then talk to the ground controllers and get permission to go off to wherever you're going. So in the case of the airline, it'd be go off to a terminal. And in my case, it was go off to a thing called the apron, which is where we would park our little aeroplanes. So I was stopped there, and I was on the radio to the ground and just doing my checks. And this aircraft came up behind me, and it must have been pretty much nose over my little aircraft. I thought, well, you're down. You can wait a few seconds while I just get sorted out and off. And then off I went, and he went off to the terminal. But I was quite pleased that these guys didn't have to do that, didn't have to do a go around. It was a source of pride. We did always have an invitation to go to the control room, and I left it almost at the very end because there were only 3 of us English people flying, so they always knew who it was coming in. And quite often I'd come down a bit hard or whatever, or the landings wouldn't be terribly elegant. So I did leave it till almost the end before I went up to the tower, and I waited till I'd had a good landing, and that was nice going up there. The only other thing that was fun about Newport News, or the only other thing, but another thing that was fun about it was that there was a NASA airfield down the road somewhere. I don't know where, it was just nearby. And NASA used these little jets. I think I don't know, they're T-34s or 38s, I don't know, whatever they are, but they use them to basically fly around. But they're cool looking jets. And the time I was at Newport News, they were doing something to the runway down at this field that the NASA guys used. So they would park the aeroplanes where we were, and they were really cool to walk past in the morning. And that we also had some A-10, they call them tank busters. They quite big aircraft, got this huge cannon coming out of the front of the nose, and then the jet engines are high up on the back, and these are really scary looking things. So we'd walk past those. And the routine in the morning was basically we'd sort out a flight plan. I would generally get to the airfield at about 7. Far might fly. Excuse me, I'm gonna have a quick drink again. Find my flight plan for the morning, because I'd be back by lunchtime and then do a bit more work and then fly in the afternoon. And then go down to the aeroplane. And in the morning, it used to be quite frosty, so I'd have to put de-icer on the aircraft on the wings. And because the Cessna has a high wing, I used to have to climb up. And the engine cowling, you could stand on these things, but they were like just very, very simple hand grips. They weren't designed to be stood on, but because I was a bit short, still am, I used to climb up there and stand with one foot on this hand grip thing and be holding the de-icer in my other, so one foot on that thing, the other leg out in the air to keep some balance. I'd be holding the de-icer spray thing, so it was like a fire extinguisher. It looked a bit like a fire extinguisher. So holding the big bottle part in one hand and holding up the nozzle with the other and spraying it over the wing. Now, I'm pretty sure I was probably breaking all sorts of health and safety rules there, because really I should have had a ladder or something. But anyway, it is what it is, and that was what I used to do. But it got me going, and that'd be one of my things. And then I do remember on one afternoon, I was getting ready for a solo, and I'd seen my instructor with another student getting out onto the apron where the aircraft were. And what we would do, we'd run the engines up on the apron first of all, and then just try sort of full throttling at one point. We'd actually have tried these things called magnetos, but there were 2 of them. So you'd turn them off and you'd rev up, and then turn the other one off and on, whatever you do, and rev up. I remember doing that, and I got distracted seeing my instructor, and I forgot to put my feet on the brakes to hold the aircraft in place. And as I pushed the throttle up, the aircraft lurched forward. So I mean, my feet were straight on the brake, but I was really embarrassed that he might have seen me doing that. So anyway, they're my stories. So I hope you found them entertaining. I don't know if you ever think about doing flying or would like to try flying. If you do, I do recommend it. It's an amazing way to see the place. You see some fantastic people. I could talk more about some of the brilliant people I met in Leavesden when I was flying there, and got some great stories from that too. But I will not say any more on this particular podcast. So as I say, I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will speak to you again on another occasion. Oh, and one thing just before you go, please take a look at the 2026 wildlife calendar. That's available now. It's on the website. There's a link below the description of this podcast episode. So please take a look, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye now.